Hi, I'm Evan. My grandfather left me a house, a legacy, something meant to bring peace. But the day I walked in with the property manager, the door was already open, and inside, my brother and his whole family were living there like it was theirs. No warning, no permission, just lies. He smirked at me from the couch and said, "Mom said I could stay. If you don't like it, call the cops." So I did. That was the first lie I uncovered. But it wasn't the last. They stole more than a house. They rewrote the will, buried a letter meant only for me, and turned my family into strangers. Now I'm wondering, did they ever love me at all? Or was I just the quiet one, easy to push aside? And if blood doesn't make you family, what does? The drive to my grandfather's house took less than an hour, but it felt longer than it should have. The trees along the narrow Pennsylvania road were just starting to turn, patches of red and gold scattered among the green. Early autumn always reminded me of him. He used to say, "The year knows when to let go." I didn't understand that as a kid. I do now. Mark, the property manager, sat beside me in silence. We'd spoken earlier that week about getting the house ready for rent. New locks, a fresh coat of paint, maybe staging it for photos. He had his clipboard balanced on his knee, checking boxes as we pulled into the gravel driveway. The house stood exactly as I remembered. White siding, green shutters, the porch sagging slightly on the left side where Grandpa and I once fixed a beam together. The smell hit me the second I stepped out. Cedar, dry leaves, and something older, like dust mixed with memory. Mark checked the lockbox, frowning. "Huh? The key's not in here." "That's strange," I said, walking toward the front door. I didn't remember giving anyone a copy. When I wrapped up the estate paperwork months ago, everything was clear. This house was mine to manage. I reached for the handle. It turned easily under my hand. Unlocked. A chill ran through my chest, not from the air, but from the wrongness of it. "Mark," I said slowly, "did you leave it open last time you were here?" He shook his head. "No, sir. I locked up myself. Always do." Before I could reply, the faint sound of laughter drifted through the door. Children. A TV playing cartoons. I froze. Mark's brows knit together. I pushed the door open. The smell inside was completely different. Gone was Grandpa's faint cologne and the scent of polished wood. Instead, I caught whiffs of fried food, detergent, and something sweet. Maybe syrup spilled on the carpet. There were shoes scattered by the entryway, tiny sneakers, a pair of work boots, and a woman's flats. Down the hall, light poured out from the living room. Then I saw him, Luke, my older brother, leaning back on the old couch like it had always belonged to him, remote in hand, his legs crossed comfortably. His wife, Jenna, sat nearby folding laundry. Their 3 kids sprawled across the floor, watching TV, a half-eaten bowl of cereal tipping on the rug. For a second, I thought I'd stepped into someone else's life. "Luke?" My voice came out quieter than I meant. He didn't look surprised, just smirked, eyes flicking from me to Mark and back again. "Well, look who finally decided to visit." "What are you doing here?" I asked. He shrugged. "Living. Mom said I could stay here for a while. You weren't using it." I looked around. My grandfather's framed photo, the one that used to sit above the mantel, was gone. In its place was a crayon drawing taped to the wall, a crooked house with stick figures smiling in front. My stomach tightened. "This isn't your place to move into." "Relax, Evan," he said, using that tone he always used when he wanted to sound older, wiser. "It's family. Mom said it's fine." Mom doesn't own this house. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Well, maybe she should. Grandpa wouldn't have wanted it sitting empty. You don't even live in this town anymore. That doesn't make it yours, I said. Jenna finally looked up from the laundry. You're overreacting, she said. It's just temporary. The kids love it here. They feel close to their great-grandpa. I could feel Mark shifting beside me, uncomfortable. He whispered, You want me to step outside? No, I said, never taking my eyes off Luke. I want to understand what's going on. Luke sighed, like he was tired of explaining. Look, man, it's just until we get back on our feet. You've got your own house, your job. Don't make this a big deal. A big deal? That was exactly what it was. Grandpa's last wish was for this place to stay in the family, but under my care. I'd spent months dealing with paperwork, taxes, repairs, and now Luke had simply taken it. Do you realize how this looks? I said quietly. He grinned. Like I'm making good use of the space. I stepped further in, scanning the room. My grandfather's old tools were missing from the corner. The shelves I built with him were cluttered with toys. The armchair he used to sit in had a juice stain spreading across the seat. Something inside me snapped, but not loudly. It was the quiet kind of break, the one that settles deep before you even know it's happened. Luke, I said, steady. You need to leave. Today. His grin widened. If you don't like it, call the cops. The room went still. The TV kept playing, some cartoon character laughing in the background, the sound sharp against the silence. I could feel Mark tense beside me, waiting for me to say something. My breath came out slow, even. All right then, I said. I will. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, and started dialing. Luke's smirk faltered. You're not serious. I didn't answer. I pressed the phone to my ear, the dial tone clicked, and the dispatcher's calm voice came through. 911. What's your emergency? Before I could speak, Jenna's voice cut through the room, high and angry. You're really doing this to your own brother? Her words hung in the air, sharp as glass. For a split second, I saw Grandpa's face in my mind, the way he'd look when he was disappointed, when someone crossed a line in the family. I took a breath, steadying myself. Yes, I said finally, eyes fixed on Luke. I am. Outside, the sound of a car passing down the street faded into the distance, leaving the house heavy with silence again. Somewhere deep in me, I knew nothing about this day would ever be undone. I stood by the doorway long after the officers left, the echo of their boots still fading down the front steps. Somewhere in me, something had shifted. Quiet but final. The house had never felt smaller. Or louder. Luke didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just looked at me with that same smug calm he always wore when he thought he was untouchable. You really called the cops on your own family, he said, like he was still trying to process it. You've always been good at pretending to be the decent one, but this right here, cold. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to explain. I leaned against the doorframe, watching the late afternoon sun cut lines across the hardwood floor, touching the corners where Grandpa once kept his boots. The house felt used, not lived in. Used. Luke's kids had gone quiet. They sat huddled near the hallway, unsure whether to keep playing or follow their mother's tension. Marla stood, arms crossed, guarding them like I was some kind of threat. You're heartless, Evan, she said, her voice tight. They're just children. They need a home. But I guess you wouldn't understand that. I swallowed the first 10 responses that came to mind, let it sit for a beat, then said, quietly but firmly, "They're his responsibility, not mine." She looked at Luke like I just cursed out loud. He didn't blink. He just laughed, not from amusement, more like disbelief with a hint of venom. "We've got 7 days," he said flatly. "Fine. That's more than some people get when you toss them out like garbage." He scooped up one of the cereal bowls from the floor and walked it to the kitchen. The clatter of the bowl hitting the sink made Marla flinch. They didn't leave immediately. They packed slowly, deliberately. Luke told the kids to gather their things like it was just a weekend trip and nothing more. Marla muttered under her breath while folding clothes into an old duffel. Mark had stepped outside, giving them space. He knew better than to get involved in whatever this was. The front door finally clicked shut behind them around dusk. The noise they carried with them, voices, footsteps, little bursts of laughter, left a ringing silence in their wake. I stood in the living room, surrounded by chaos that didn't belong to me. Toys I didn't buy. Crumbs on the couch cushions, a dent in the wall near the staircase that hadn't been there last year. The air smelled stale again. Cigarette smoke clung to the fabric. The walls seemed to sag under the weight of it all. I dropped onto the couch. The springs creaked differently now. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. My phone buzzed against my thigh. I didn't want to check it, but habit won. A message from Mom. "What did you do?" "Luke told me you humiliated him in front of his kids. You should apologize." I stared at the screen. "No, what happened? No, are you all right?" Just a direct demand, as if I was the one who broke in, stole a house, and dared someone to do something about it. The grip on my phone tightened. For a second, I thought I might throw it across the room, but I didn't. I just sat there, reading that line again and again. Apologize. That word. It landed heavy. She never asked Luke to apologize. Not when he wrecked Dad's truck at 16 and blamed me. Not when he bailed on helping during Grandpa's last months. Not even when he borrowed money and forgot to pay it back. Growing up, he got the bigger slice of cake, the front seat, the last word. I got, "Be the bigger person." I leaned back, letting the silence settle. It wasn't about the house. It never had been. This was about control. Luke pushing boundaries, and Mom expecting me to bend to keep the peace. I thought I was past caring, but the truth sat in my chest like a stone. Mark returned just after sunset. He knocked once before letting himself in. His voice was calm, but cautious. "They're gone?" "For now," I said. He nodded and scanned the room. "You should change the locks tomorrow," he said. "People like that. They don't leave easy." He didn't mean it unkindly, just honest. "I'll call someone in the morning," I replied. Mark paused, then added, "I've seen things like this before. When family doesn't respect boundaries, they test everything, even the law." I looked around the room again, trying to picture it empty, restored. But the past few hours clung to everything. The scuff marks on the floor, the faint outline where Grandpa's photo used to hang. "Thanks for coming today," I said finally. "No problem," he said. "Let me know if you need anything." After he left, I made myself a cup of coffee I didn't finish. The bitterness didn't help the aftertaste of the evening. The hours dragged on. I tried watching TV, but the sound grated. I opened a window, then closed it again when the chill crept in. Eventually, I just sat in the armchair, staring at nothing. I wasn't mourning the house. I was mourning what it represented. The belief that family would always do right by you, that they'd understand boundaries, that fairness was something automatic. I knew better now. It was nearly midnight when I stood to head upstairs. I switched off the hallway light, leaving just the kitchen glow behind me, and that's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of keys turning in the front door lock. I didn't move right away. That turning sound. It shouldn't have been there. I hadn't given anyone new keys. The locksmith had changed both locks earlier that afternoon. I'd watched him test them twice. I even locked up myself after he left. So, unless the man had double-crossed me for a few bucks, which I doubted, that sound meant someone was trying to get in with an old key. I walked slowly toward the front door, careful not to let the floorboards creak under me. The house was dark except for the dim glow from the kitchen. I stayed close to the shadows, just in case. I didn't hear anything else. No voices, no footsteps. After a minute or two, I cracked the door and looked outside. No one was there. Just the empty porch and a flickering street lamp down the road. I locked it again. Deadbolt. Chain. Then slid a chair beneath the handle, something Grandpa used to do when storms rolled through. I didn't sleep much that night. I must have gotten an hour or two before the light pushed through the windows and made the dust in the air glow like tiny ghosts. The house felt colder than it did yesterday. Not from temperature, but something else. Like it was holding its breath again, waiting for something to happen. I walked through each room that morning, not just to check the locks, but to see what Luke left behind. Piles of junk. A chipped end table, empty food containers tucked behind the recliner. He'd pulled drawers out, left bills stuffed into corners, and even left an open peanut butter jar on the kitchen counter like he was planning to come back in an hour. He probably was. I found a stack of unopened envelopes near the hall closet, most of them addressed to Grandpa, a few in Luke's name, all past due. In the back hallway, I saw something that made me stop. The door to the backyard looked fine from a distance, but when I stepped closer, I saw the scrape marks near the lock. Someone had tried to force it. I opened it slowly. The morning air was sharp, smelled like wet soil and pine. Right on the welcome mat, half tucked under it, like it was dropped in a hurry, was a key. Not one of mine. Not from the new set either. I bent down and picked it up. Heavy. Worn. He made a copy. I clenched it in my fist for a second, debating whether to throw it into the woods or grind it under my boot. Instead, I slipped it into a drawer and locked it. I needed air. Space. Something to pull me out of that headspace before I made a decision I couldn't walk back from. So I put on my coat and walked down the block to the diner Grandpa used to take me to after church. Same cracked leather booths. Same smell of burnt coffee and bacon grease. Same woman behind the counter who hadn't changed her hairstyle since Clinton was in office. I picked a seat by the window. Mark showed up 10 minutes later. I didn't text him, but somehow he knew I'd be there. That's just how he is. He sat down across from me, sliding a mug toward me. "You look like you got hit by a truck." "Didn't sleep much," I said. "I figured." He added 2 sugars to his coffee, stirred without looking up. "How bad was it?" "He tried to get back in last night," I said. "I heard the lock. Someone tried." Mark didn't flinch. "You change all of them." "Thought I did. Found a key this morning. Not from the set the locksmith gave me." "So he made a copy." I nodded. "Probably more than one." He sighed. "People don't break boundaries unless someone's taught them they can." That line hit something deep. I didn't answer right away, just stared out the window at the pickup parked across the street. He wasn't wrong. Luke's been stepping over lines since we were kids, and every time someone moved the line for him, especially Mom. She made excuses, asked for patience, told me to keep the peace, until there was nothing left to keep. My phone buzzed on the table. Another text from her. "You're taking this too far. He just needs a chance to get his feet under him again." I typed back, "It's been 10 years, Mom." Then stared at it for a moment before deleting it. What was the point? Mark looked at me carefully. "You know what you should do." I shook my head. "It's family." "No, it's manipulation wearing a family's face." He didn't say it harshly, just clear, like a man stating the weather. I hated that he was right. Back at the house, I got to work again. Called the locksmith. Had him rekey the back door. I watched him work this time like a hawk. Made sure he sealed everything. I asked him, "You ever seen people make copies like this?" "All the time," he said. "Usually it's messy breakups or tenants trying to stay longer rent-free, but it's the family stuff that gets nasty." He packed up his tools and wished me luck. I tested the locks myself. Each turned smooth, solid, satisfying. I was ready to pour myself a cup of coffee when I noticed something near the basement door. Mud. Not a lot. Just faint footprints leading from the back hallway, across the kitchen tile, and down the steps. My stomach tightened. I hadn't been in the basement since the funeral. I took a step toward it. The door was cracked open, not wide, just enough that it might have been nudged or pulled. I looked around. Nothing broken, no windows open, no other signs, but the footprints, they didn't match my boots. I reached for the light switch. Nothing. The bulb must have gone out. Still, something faint flickered below. Not just light. Voices. I stepped back. My hand hovered over the phone. Then slowly, carefully, I stepped toward the stairs. The wood beneath my feet moaned under the weight, each creak stretching into the silence like a warning. The air was thick, damp and heavy, carrying the scent of mildew and something faintly metallic. Dust floated in the thin beam of light spilling from the kitchen, the only thing separating me from the darkness below. I stopped halfway down, listening. "She'll never let him kick us out," a voice whispered. "Luke." The words came muffled, but I knew that tone. Confident, sure of himself, the same way he used to sound when he'd sneak out at night as a teenager, daring me to tell on him. Then another voice followed, soft but trembling. Marla. "But what if he really calls the cops again?" "He won't," Luke said. "He's weak, always was." My pulse jumped. I gripped the railing, letting the cold metal bite into my hand. Weak. That word had been his weapon since we were kids. I'd heard it after every argument, every time I refused to fight back. To him, silence meant surrender. I took the last 3 steps quietly. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering faintly, the kind that made every shadow look like it was breathing. Boxes were stacked against the concrete walls. The old furnace hummed softly. And there they were, sitting near the old trunk Grandpa kept near the far corner. Luke's back was to me, hunched over the trunk, rummaging through papers. Marla stood behind him, wringing her hands. He froze the moment I stepped into the light. Marla gasped. "Couldn't stay away, could you?" I said. My voice was calm, though my heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. "You came back without permission. This stops now." Luke turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "Permission?" he repeated, almost laughing. "You think a piece of paper means anything in this family?" He gestured toward the trunk with a kind of cruel amusement. That's Grandpa's old chest. I found something inside. Luke, I warned, whatever you think you found. He cut me off. You don't get to play innocent. You think you're the hero because the will had your name on it? He opened the trunk wider, pulling out a stack of yellowed envelopes and folders, tossing them aside until he found one. An old, creased document. This, he said, waving it like a trophy. This says shared inheritance, not yours alone. The paper trembled in his hand, more from the air than conviction, but the words hit me anyway. Shared inheritance. That's not the final version, I said quietly. Grandpa changed it after Dad passed. The updated wills with the attorney in Harrisburg. Luke smiled, thin and sharp. Yeah? Then where's your proof? My jaw tightened. He was baiting me, and I knew it. Put it down, I said. You're crossing a line you won't come back from. He took a slow step toward me, holding the paper between two fingers, like it was a confession he'd finally been waiting to deliver. You always thought the rules would protect you, didn't you? That life was fair if you followed them. But in this family, rules bend to whoever shouts the loudest. His words stung more than I wanted to admit, because part of me knew he was right. Not about the house, but about the noise. In our family, silence was weakness, and I'd been quiet too long. Marla stepped closer, her voice breaking through the tension. Luke, please, let's go. He's serious this time. Look at him. He shrugged her off, the paper crumpling slightly in his hand. Go ahead, he said to me, eyes locked on mine. Call the cops again. See what happens when Mom gets here. Something inside me shifted then. Not anger, not even fear, just a deep, exhausted clarity. You keep hiding behind her because it's the only way you win, I said. You've been doing it your whole life. He laughed, a low, bitter sound. At least she's honest about who she loves. That one cut deep. He knew exactly where to aim. I took another step forward. You think this is about love? It's about respect. And you've burned every bridge that led to it. Marla looked between us, tears forming. This isn't right. None of this is. You're brothers. Luke snapped. Stay out of it. She flinched. The sound echoed off the walls, louder than anything else in the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. The furnace kicked on again, humming in the background like a heartbeat trying to fill the silence. I bent down, picked up one of the scattered envelopes. It was postmarked 2003, Grandpa's handwriting, shaky but familiar. Inside was a letter addressed to both of us. I didn't open it, just held it for a second, letting the weight of it settle in my hand. Grandpa left this place to whoever would take care of it, I said finally. Not whoever could grab it first. Luke smirked. And I'm the only one living here, aren't I? You mean squatting, I said. He stepped closer, too close. You really think you're better than me? I looked him straight in the eye. No, I just stopped pretending we're the same. For the first time, I saw something flicker across his face, something that wasn't arrogance, maybe fear, maybe recognition. Marla tugged his arm again. Please, let's go before this gets worse. He jerked his arm free. You go if you want, he said. I'm not leaving. The bulb above us flickered again, throwing shadows across the walls. And then, from upstairs, the sound of a door slamming made us all freeze. A familiar voice called my name. Sharp, cold, and commanding. Evan! My stomach dropped. Mom. Luke's grin returned, slow and satisfied. His words hung in the air like smoke. She's here. He said it like he'd won something, like her arrival was checkmate. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. The sound of her heels on the floor above echoed down the staircase, sharp and sure. She always walked like that, chin up, spine stiff, announcing her presence before a word ever left her mouth. By the time she reached the bottom of the stairs, the living room had turned cold. The windows rattled slightly with the breeze from the gray skies outside. Rain was threatening, but hadn't yet committed. Fitting. She stepped inside like she still lived here, her eyes scanning the room like a general returning to a battlefield. Her gaze landed on me first, then briefly flicked to Luke, who, as expected, had positioned himself just a few steps behind her, hands in his pockets, head tilted like he'd just been wronged. "Evan," she said, her voice tight, "what is this I hear about you calling the police on your brother?" I didn't get up from the armrest I was leaning on. "Because he broke into my house, Mom." She blinked once. "This isn't just your house. Your grandfather wanted this for the family." "No," I said quietly but without backing down. "He wanted it to go to whoever would take care of it, whoever wouldn't let it rot." Her lips pressed together, a move she'd perfected over decades. "Luke has 3 children, Evan. You have none. Think about who needs it more." There it was, the argument I knew she'd use, the one that always came dressed in sympathy, but walked on the back of judgment. She didn't mean need, she meant deserve. Something inside me cracked open, not new pain, but old pain finally given voice. "You always say that," I said, barely above a whisper, "as if having kids excuses everything else." Luke snorted, arms crossed, leaning against the doorway like this was all entertainment. "See? Mom gets it." I turned to him, calm but direct. "You don't want a home, Luke. You want control. You want leverage." He shrugged, smiling. Says the guy who lost his wife and now clings to old floorboards like they're all he's got left. The punch landed, not in my face, but somewhere deeper, somewhere raw. My marriage hadn't failed overnight. It had cracked slowly, under the pressure of silence and swallowed pride. Luke had mocked it back then, too. When I told him we were separating, his first response wasn't concern. It was laughter. Still, the shame didn't sting the same way now. It burned cleaner, like fire that had already scorched everything and left nothing left to destroy. I looked back at Mom. "You've always forgiven him. Every lie, every mess, every time he screwed up and let someone else pay for it. Do you even know what that's done to the rest of us?" Her eyes flickered. A moment. No more. Then the wall came back up. "Family means forgiveness," she said. "No," I said. "Family means accountability." She looked like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Not right away. Luke shifted his weight, irritated by the silence. "We'll leave," he muttered. "But don't think this is over. You'll regret this, Evan, when you're old and sick and no one's there to wipe your nose." I met his eyes. "I've been alone for a long time. I just didn't realize it until now." The words must have struck harder than I expected. Even Mom's mouth opened slightly, as if she was about to say something but couldn't find the sentence. She turned to leave, pausing by the stairs. Her voice was lower now, but colder. "You always were too proud for your own good." Luke followed her up, slowly, but before reaching the top step, he glanced back and leaned in just enough so I'd hear it. "You'll see me again," he whispered, "sooner than you think." The door creaked shut behind them, and for a long time, I just stood there. The silence in the room was unlike before. It wasn't peace. It wasn't even relief. It was the realization that sometimes when a door closes, it doesn't slam. It just disappears. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat by the window. The sky outside had finally opened, the first drops of rain tracing paths down the glass. A breeze slipped through the cracks in the frame, brushing against my arm. They were gone. But the echo of their words lingered in the walls, like smoke after a fire. I didn't know what would come next, only that it wouldn't be quiet for long. And I was right. 3 days passed. The rain lingered, sometimes a drizzle, sometimes sheets pounding the windows like fists. I filled the hours scrubbing the kitchen counters, pulling up old carpet, and tossing out whatever Luke had left behind. Busted toys, junk mail, a broken chair that leaned like it had given up halfway through life. I tried to make the space breathe again, tried to believe it was mine. Maybe even tried to believe peace had finally arrived. But peace doesn't knock first. That night, the storm returned with force. Thunder rolled low across the hills, and wind clawed at the siding like it wanted in. I was up late, reading through a stack of old bills Grandpa had stuffed into a cigar box when headlights swept across the living room wall. My stomach clenched. I walked to the window. A car door slammed. Then footsteps. Heavy, unhurried, like someone daring me to open the door. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped onto the porch. There he was. Luke, drenched in rain, face taut, eyes shining in the beam like an animal cornered too many times. His jacket clung to him like skin. "You think you can erase me?" he shouted, voice hoarse from the cold or something worse. "This house is mine too." I didn't move from the top step. "You're trespassing." He laughed, a sound sharp and broken. "No, I'm taking back what's mine." He stormed past me, boots thudding on the porch, dragging mud into the hallway like a trail of spite. I could smell the rain on him, but underneath that, whiskey. He wasn't just angry. He was spiraling. Inside, he paced. "Mom's on my side," he said, as if it were a shield. "She said she'll call her lawyer. Said you're trying to steal from your own blood." I stayed near the door. "Then let her." He turned fast, eyes wide. "You've always been the selfish one. Grandpa gave you everything. The car, the college help, this house, and you still act like some martyr." "No," I said, keeping my voice low. "It makes me responsible. You could have had the same chance. You just kept throwing it away." He slammed his fist on the dining table, Grandpa's old one, and the wood cracked straight down the center. The sound echoed, and then it was just rain again, whispering across the roof. He looked at the damage like he hadn't meant to. Maybe he hadn't. Or maybe that table had just been the easiest target. His breathing slowed, but his hands stayed clenched. "I've got nowhere else to go, Evan." The words came out different. Not loud, not bitter, just raw. I opened my mouth, almost said something, almost offered something, but stopped. "No," I said instead. "You do. You just don't want to face it." He stared at me, his expression shifting, fury giving way to something darker, something that looked a lot like fear. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. Not like a threat, like a truth he believed. Then he turned and left. The door slammed behind him so hard the frame shook, a picture on the wall dropped sideways. I didn't move, not for a full minute. The silence now wasn't peace either. It was fatigue. The whole house held its breath again. I picked up the broken frame, set it upright. I ran a hand through my hair, wiped mud from the floor, and stood still under the humming kitchen light. I was finally alone again. but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like survival. 10 minutes passed, maybe more. I poured a glass of water, leaned against the counter, listening to the rain ease up. And then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of glass breaking from the basement. My body tensed. I set the glass down slowly and grabbed the flashlight again. The house held still, too still. Every creak in the walls felt magnified by the storm outside. Thunder rumbled in the distance, deep and slow, like something old waking up. I moved toward the basement door, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. The doorknob felt damp, not from rain, from sweat. The moment I opened the door, a gust of cold air greeted me. Wet, musty, sharp. The kind of air that warned you something wasn't right. I flicked the flashlight on, the beam catching dust particles in the dark like they were suspended in time. Then I stepped down. Each step creaked louder than it should have. Somewhere behind me, the wind howled through the broken window. I reached the bottom and turned in a slow circle. Glass crunched under my boots. The small basement window, the one near the far corner, had been shattered. Rain dripped through it in a steady rhythm, pooling on the concrete. I spotted muddy footprints, half smeared in the water, leading across the floor toward the old trunk. That trunk again. It sat wide open now, its contents ransacked. But as I stepped closer, I noticed something strange. Taped to the underside of the lid, nearly invisible in the low light, was a sealed envelope. My name was written on it in sharp, careful handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Grandpa. My hands trembled as I pulled the envelope free. The tape peeled away with a quiet rip that still sounded too loud in the silence. I tore it open, heart hammering. The paper inside was thin and yellowed, dated just a week before he passed. Evan, it began, if you're reading this, then something's gone wrong. I stopped breathing for a second. This house is yours, not because of money, but because you understood what it means to care for something others take for granted. I've seen how your brother lives, how he lies. This place isn't for him. Protect it. And protect yourself. There was more, but my fingers froze halfway down the page. Luke had known. He found this. And instead of coming clean, he hid it. Lied again. All that noise about fairness, about shared inheritance. It was another play. Another mask. I took a step back, the letter still in my hand. And that's when I heard it. A slow creak from the top of the stairs. Then his voice. Looking for something? I turned slowly, flashlight rising to meet him. Luke stood halfway down the stairs, soaked again. This time, not from rain, from sweat and fury. In one hand, he held a crowbar. The other clenched the railing like he was keeping himself from lunging. You weren't supposed to find that, he said, voice low and thick with contempt. I kept my voice steady. You broke in to steal from me? His laugh was bitter. To take back what's mine. You've had enough. I took one slow breath, raised my phone, and hit record. This is over, Luke. He froze. You wouldn't dare, he said, voice faltering. You dared first. Silence stretched long and tight. The only sound was the rain tapping the broken glass, like time itself waiting to see what he'd do. Luke's jaw twitched. For a second, I thought he might swing. Instead, he lowered the crowbar, his shoulders slumping just slightly. His voice dropped to a whisper, but it still cut. You think this makes you the hero? He said. You just killed what's left of this family. No, I said quietly. You did. The day you chose greed over love. He stared at me for a long second, something broken flickering in his eyes. Then he turned and walked up the stairs. The basement door slammed hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. I exhaled, not relief, not yet, and looked back at the letter. That's when I noticed it. On the back of the last page, in the corner, almost like an afterthought, was another message, a name, and a phone number I didn't recognize. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter still trembling in my hand, and punched the number into my phone. The rain had stopped, but the tension in the air hadn't. Outside, the sky was dull and heavy, hanging low like it knew what was about to unfold. The line rang once, twice. Then a voice picked up, calm, deep, older. "Mr. Whitaker?" "Yes. Who's this?" "This is Evan James Whitaker. You don't know me, but you were listed in a letter from my grandfather. Are you Mr. Clayton?" There was a pause, a sharp inhale, then a quiet reply. "I've been expecting your call." My chest tightened. "You knew?" "I didn't know when, but I knew eventually you'd reach out. Evan, I was your grandfather's attorney. He entrusted me with his final amendment. But something happened." My throat felt dry. "What do you mean?" "He sent me the signed and notarized update shortly before he passed. It was clear, direct. You were to be the sole heir. The house, the land, everything. But before I could submit it for probate, someone contacted our office, said you'd moved overseas, that you were giving up your rights." My hands curled into fists. "Who?" "We couldn't confirm it, but the person claimed to be acting on your behalf. It didn't take long to connect the dots." "Luke." A cold pulse ran through my body. "I didn't move. I never left the state." "I figured as much. But legally, without your direct communication, we couldn't proceed. We waited. Now that you've made contact, we can correct this." Mr. Clayton emailed me a copy of the final will. I watched the document download slowly, each second dragging longer than it should have. When it opened, I stared at Grandpa's signature, the date, the seal. Everything was official, undeniable. And there it was. My name, clear, uncontested. All those arguments, the manipulation, the fake generosity masked as family loyalty. It made sense now. Luke wasn't confused. He was calculated. And Mom. She'd chosen sides long before I ever got the chance to speak. I forwarded the files to my lawyer without a second thought, then leaned back in my chair and stared out the window. There was no joy in it. Just a quiet kind of knowing. That evening, just after the sun dipped beneath the clouds, I heard a car pull up outside. 2 doors slammed. I didn't even need to look. Luke and Mom. I opened the front door before they knocked. They were already halfway up the steps. Mom's face was stone, but her eyes flickered. Luke looked like someone who'd been cornered and was trying to bluff his way out. "You went behind our backs," Mom said, arms crossed tight. "No," I said calmly. "You went behind Grandpa's." I stepped aside and let them in, not out of courtesy, but control. I had the upper hand now, and they knew it. On the coffee table sat the printed email from Mr. Clayton and the original letter I found in the basement. "This," I said, handing Mom the envelope, "is his final word." She opened it slowly, read it once, then again. Her mouth twitched. "He wouldn't do this to us." "He didn't," I said. "You did this to yourselves." Luke snatched the legal document from the table and skimmed it, eyes wide, skin draining of color. "This doesn't change anything," he snapped. "We'll fight it. Right, Mom?" But Mom didn't answer. "Mom," he pressed. She shook her head, faintly. He must have had a reason. Luke turned on me. "You'll pay for this, Evan. You think you've won, but I'll drag you through court for years." "Go ahead," I said. "Just make sure you read the last clause." He paused, looked down. His eyes landed on the line at the bottom of the will, the final twist of Grandpa's foresight. "Any family member who contests this shall be disinherited and legally barred from any portion of the estate." Luke went pale. The document trembled in his grip. Then, like a child caught cheating, he crumpled it in his hand and hurled it at my feet. "This family was already dead," he hissed. "No," I replied. "It's finally breathing." He stormed out. Mom lingered a moment longer, eyes scanning the living room like she didn't recognize it. Or maybe like she was realizing she never truly owned any part of it. When she turned to follow him, she looked back, not angry, not apologetic, just lost. The door closed with a soft thud. Silence. I picked up the torn paper, smoothed it gently, and placed it back in the envelope. And then, just as I exhaled, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. No caller ID. I almost ignored it. Then I heard his voice. "You think you've won," Luke hissed, "but you have no idea what's coming next." Then silence. The call ended before I could say a word. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and just stood there for a long minute, staring at the blank screen. His voice still echoed in my ears, but it didn't land like it used to. There was no fear in me anymore. Just a strange calm, the kind that comes when you've already been through the worst of it. That night, I barely slept. The storm outside had passed, but I could still feel it inside me. I didn't know if that call was a threat or a cry for help, and to be honest, I wasn't sure I cared to find out. A week went by. The house, once weighed down by memories and dust, slowly began to feel lighter. I opened windows, scrubbed baseboards, repainted the trim in the hallway that always bothered Grandpa, but he never got around to fixing. I replaced the flickering bulb in the porch light. It was simple stuff, but it felt like reclaiming something, not just in the house, but in myself. On Thursday, my old friend Rachel, who'd been a realtor in town for years, stopped by with her camera bag slung over her shoulder. "So," she said as she walked through the front door and took a slow look around, "you really going through with it?" I nodded. "I am." She raised an eyebrow. "After all this, you're just handing it over?" "Not handing it over," I said, "passing it forward. Someone else can build their life here, the way Grandpa hoped someone would." She didn't push, just gave a small nod and got to work, snapping pictures, jotting notes, pausing by the fireplace like she was remembering her own stories in this place. We'd grown up on the same street. She used to come here with me after school when we were kids. Back then, the living room always smelled like pipe smoke and old leather. Now it smelled like pine cleaner and fresh paint. That night, after she left, I made a cup of coffee and sat by the front window, the one that looked out on the old oak tree. That tree had been there longer than me, longer than Grandpa, maybe even longer than the house. It had seen every storm and every sunbeam. It had outlived all of us in its own quiet way. Just before I turned in, I noticed something odd by the front door. A cream-colored envelope slipped through the mail slot. No name, no return address. I bent down, picked it up, and opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper, a child's drawing, 3 stick figures standing beneath that same oak tree. One tall figure in the middle, 2 smaller ones on either side. All smiling, all holding hands. On the back, in large, shaky letters, "Uncle Evan, I miss Grandpa's house." I stared at it for a long time, longer than I should have. and for the first time in weeks, something in my chest cracked, not in pain, but in memory. I could hear Grandpa's voice again, clear as day, saying, "You don't protect a house with locks, Evan. You protect it with love." I pinned the drawing to the corkboard above my desk, right next to the framed letter he left me. 2 messages, generations apart, one written in neat cursive, the other in crayon. Both carried more weight than any legal document ever could. As the sun dipped behind the horizon and the last amber light streamed through the living room windows, I stood up and took one final walk through the house. The kitchen, the stairs, the creaky step that always made Grandpa curse under his breath. The guest room that was mine when I was 7. The attic door I was too afraid to open until I was 12. The basement that held more secrets than I'll ever fully understand. I came back to the front door, paused. "I forgive you, Luke," I said aloud, to no one in particular, "but you'll never live here again." The curtains shifted gently behind me, caught by the wind. The air carried that familiar scent, sawdust, fresh rain, and something else I couldn't name. Maybe it was peace. I stepped outside and locked the door behind me, not out of fear, not even out of finality, just because I was ready. Blood can bind you to people, or chain you to pain. The choice is yours.